My name is JPeace. This is public speaking, my persuasive speech for Module 3. This is my audience. And my cameraman. Today we're going to be talking about voting against one's own self-interest. What is this? This is a popular phenomenon that's been coming up after the last couple of elections where examples like the poor voting for Republicans or conservatives, the well-off voting for Democratic or pro-social reform candidates, the sick voting against healthcare reform, etc. I want to be clear, this is not a partisan issue. I'm not going to be trying to turn any Democrats into Republicans or Republicans into Democrats because everybody should be libertarian. It is my purpose, however, to encourage you with my time today to figure out what your interest is and at what weight you might consider your interest versus the interests of others. So there are a few reasons why people might choose to vote against one's own self-interest. Civil unrest. Look at the United States in the 1950s. There was a large amount of civil unrest. There was rioting in the streets, and people wanted social reform. They wanted civil rights. They wanted fair rights for women. There was a lot of inequalities that the people of the United States got tired of living with. So they decided to change with their vote. So there's a philanthropic aspect to it. One might choose to pick someone else's goal instead of their own when they vote at the ballot. But you have to be careful, as you do when discussing politics or government with anyone, because if you simply state that you're voting against your own interest, this could be considered a hurtful condensation. So one thing you might consider is if you were to go up, for example, to a poor individual and say, why did you vote for a Republican candidate? Why did you vote conservative? You're poor. What do you have to gain? That's condescending. And it immediately puts the person on their back foot and they're defensive, and of course they're going to fight you with their reasons why. You didn't understand their priorities when you brought this up. They may have voted more philanthropic than they did for their own interests. So you have to take a step back when you go to vote. You have to determine what your interest is. What do you have to lose by one candidate going in over another? What are you willing to lose if you are wanting to be philanthropic? And at what weight would you put both of those when considering a vote? So Gene Roddenberry had a really great quote for the original Star Trek back in the 1970s. It was by the wisest character in the universe, Spock, who said, "The needs of the many often outweigh the needs of the few or the one," which basically means it doesn't get any more liberal than that. What other people may need may be more important than what you need or what you want. So that's a thing to take into consideration. So this is why we have to sit down and make a plan on what really matters to us and what we think we can achieve or are willing to not achieve by our voting choice. So making a plan and sticking with it. What matters to you right now? When you go to the ballot box in the next major election, what is the issue concerning you? Where is your self-interest? Do you need, for example, on our next election, do you need a more liberal candidate? Do you need a more Republican candidate? Are you fine with the current one that's in office? You may have a different goal set than the person right next to you, and that's okay. But if you're not wanting to vote in your own self-interest, if you are wanting to take a step back and say, hey, I want to help out my neighbor more than I really want to help out myself, because there's also that opinion. Sometimes our vote doesn't matter. And I know that's about the worst thing you could say when talking about voting, because every vote counts, every vote gets counted, but with our current electoral state college, sometimes it doesn't matter. So at the end of the day, it's all about what do you want to achieve with your vote. Whatever you decide you want to achieve with your vote, that is your best interest. I mean, period. There's really no other way that you can logically take a look at this. Whatever you decide to do with your vote, as long as you're voting, that's the goal. Your interest is possibly not going to affect you at all, and that's okay. Sometimes there is personal things that you can gain from your vote. So you can always vote down your party line, but I guarantee that if you make an informed decision, weighing your priorities against the needs of others in a balancing act, you will feel better and more confident about where you put your mark on history. Thank you very much. Once again, this is my audience. And my cameraman. Thank you guys all. Have a good night.